Great.
So, thank you to the next section of ICMI 2021. We are joined by Warren Farrell, a man who predates the modern movement, writing The Myth of Male Power that inspired so many of us to say, wait a minute, this is actually true. Why didn't I see it before? Of course, I was 8 years old at the time, but we have him here today, and we're going to have some great questions asked. Vernon, why don't you go ahead and get us started with a question?
All right, sounds good. Actually, we have one straight from Hannah Gal, who just had a documentary shown. More people should know what the boy crisis. Will you meet with politicians such as Josh Hawley, Dan Crenshaw, and Gingrich?
I have not met with those politicians, but I've gone out each year when the Republicans were competing for the presidential race in 2016 and then also in 2020. I went out to Iowa and interviewed all the Republicans, not all of them, but 7 or 8 of the Republican presidential candidates one year, and then about 8 or 9 of the Democratic candidates the next year in Iowa. And found that among the Republicans, there was a great deal of understanding of the importance of fathers and family. And there was also a lot of that understanding from Andrew Yang, who had a real sense of what the boy crisis was about, and John Hickenlooper, who's now a U.S. Senator. He was very receptive, tuned in, caring as well, and as we talked, was very much able to articulate an empathy for what boys were going through. And he did do what's called a trial balloon. That is, he put out a positive statement about that when he ran for U.S. Senator. And it did get some media in Colorado, but he didn't pick up and pursue that. Andrew Yang started to say a couple of sentences about it in one of the debates, but he didn't pick up and pursue that. The basic attitude on the part of Democrats is that we're afraid of alienating our feminist base and also, more importantly, our single mothers base, since there's so much in the boy crisis that says that children who have problems often need to be able to, are ones that have dad deprivation, that have minimal or no father involvement. And so the Democrats are fearful that that single mothers will be alienated by the statement that fathers are so important, when in fact the real statement that needs to happen is the message that we need a father warrior movement. We need to be telling men, you are needed as fathers. You used to be needed to kill and be killed in every generation's war. Now we have far fewer men that are needed to kill and be killed. We have a much greater need for men to be involved as people who love and are loved by their children, by their family. Women need the burdens of raising children as well as the joys. They need the burdens to be relieved from the burdens. Fathers need to feel some sense of being needed. And the data is overwhelming that both boy and girl children need a significant amount of dedicated father involvement in addition to mother involvement.
Thank you, Warren. And just remind everyone, definitely ask some questions in the Whova app. That's where I'll be reading questions from. I know we didn't have a presentation from Warren, but he's certainly given a lot over the years. So any questions you have, just put them in and we'll be happy to answer them to Warren. But we'll go to the next one. In your opinion, are the leading lights of the feminist movement becoming more open to criticism, less, or about the same over time? Are important feminist thought leaders aware of how the movement is popularly perceived today as compared to, say, in 1970?
Yes, I'd say that when I first got involved in the women's movement, which is I was in the board of directors of the National Organization for Women in the early 70s and first got involved in the late 60s. And at the beginning, there was a great deal of, the emphasis was on I Am Helen Reddy's song, I Am Woman, I Am Strong. Today, an increasing amount of emphasis is I am woman, I've been wronged. And so we've gone from, I am woman, I am strong, to more of a victim focus. Now, there was always a huge segment of the feminist movement that was quite critical of men and called, were saying that the world was destroyed by a patriarchy that made rules to benefit men at the expense of women. That was always part of the feminist movement, but there was much more emphasis on women are strong, women are resilient, women can do the job. Today, especially since hashtag Me Too, there are millions of women all over the world saying I was wronged by men in this way or that way. And first of all, I want to make it clear that I am a very strong supporter of hashtag Me Too. If hashtag Me Too was not a monologue, what we need is a hashtag Me Too dialogue. For every woman experiencing a type of over aggressive male, there is a male experiencing an entitlement that a woman should, that he's the one that should fear rejection. He's the one that if he moves too quickly, he's aggressive and a sexual harasser or a date rapist. If he doesn't move quickly enough, he's a wimp. And men are sort of caught between a rock and a hard place. And the feminist movement has really been focusing on, we're dominated by the patriarchy, when in fact, we weren't dominated by the patriarchy. We were dominated by a need to survive. And to survive, both sexes played roles that were restricted. Men were restricted to do some equivalent of raise money. Women were restricted to do some equivalent of raise children. My father, my grandfather, they didn't talk about rights. They talked about responsibilities and obligations. So there are very, very few women today who understand that when children come, men often transfer from saying to themselves, I'd love to be a musician, but it doesn't earn enough. I'd love to be an artist or writer. I'd love to be an elementary school teacher, but I can't support 2 or 3 children. And my wife's option to be fully involved with the children or fully involved with the workplace or some combination of both, and the possibility that my children will have some problems, and I need to have them in good schools and good neighborhoods, which means expensive homes, which means more than I can make as an elementary school teacher, an artist, or a writer, or an actor. And so they give up doing what they love to do. So many men do when they have children, and they do what they feel their family needs, putting their family before them. And what the feminist movement did is said, look at that. Men are earning more than women for the same work. And in schools, for example, the teachers are a lot more women, but the principals and the superintendents, the ones that have the power, are more men. Yes, they are more likely to be men, or at least they were, because they felt that they couldn't make enough money to help support their family as an elementary school teacher, or as that musician or that artist or whatever. And so men often gave up doing what they loved to do what they feel they needed to do, they had to do. And the feminist movement, instead of saying, God, men, thank you for contributing to the family in this way. Thank you for giving up your dreams, or not even talking that much to us about the dreams, so we didn't feel guilty that you gave them up. And instead, earning money that the rest of us can spend helping ourselves, all of our children, live the best possible lives, and for us to have options that you didn't have in your life. Thank you. Instead of saying thank you, they said men the oppressor, patriarchy that was controlling women and doing the things that we wanted at the expense of women. Nothing could be farther from the truth.
Dean Hedges asks, have you connected with Eric Carroll in his efforts to include fathers in the family?
Absolutely. Eric Carroll, I chair a coalition to create a White House Council on Boys and Men, and Eric is part of that coalition and has been very dedicated to really talking about these issues and bringing it to the media, and even has had some interviews with some very top Republicans toward that end, and he's also interviewed me a few times. Good man. He came out and visited me a few months ago.
So I want to respond just real quick to the last thing you're talking about. And, I've read your book, Boy Crisis. It's also behind Warren, just in case you don't see it. But I love this book, and it's definitely helping me write my book, Boys and Men's Issue Handbook. But I want to say on that specific part that you're talking about is one of the things I got inspired from your book was the concept of male emancipation. And it's something that's one of my big issues. And in fact, Vernon has wrote an article in my magazine called Men's Magazine about that topic. So that was something that we both really got from you. But moving on to the next question from Carl Palmer. Thank you for your contribution over the many years, Warren. What have been your largest surprises, biggest disappointments, and greatest joys in your time bringing men and boys issues to the attention of others?
What a poignant question. Thank you. My biggest joy has been, well, I'll give you an example. A few weeks ago, I got a letter from a guy who said that he had heard about me through an interview that Jordan Peterson did with me. And as a result, read the Boy Crisis book. And he said, I had been raised by a mother, a single mom all my life. And my grandmother and my aunts had no men in their lives. I had no structure, no motivation, no discipline. And to sort of find something in my life of purpose, I got involved with fascist groups. And two of those fascist groups were involved in nurture or breeding two of the major mass shooters in the world. And he said, I then, to identify with that, I wrote a 52-page manifesto to explain why I was to leave behind after I did my mass shooting. And he said, as a result of Jordan Peterson's interview with me, and then I ended up reading The Boy Crisis, and it scared me, and in the sense that it seemed like you were a spy in my home if I didn't know better, that everything that you said there was exactly what I was experiencing. And and for the first time in my life, I had really feel seen and felt heard, and that somebody got me. And that sort of released me to be able to say, maybe I need to pursue something more constructive in life. And it was the feeling of being seen and heard, that here is somebody that is clearly in the type of, was clearly in the category that we would call the ultimate hater, the most, the greatest example of toxic masculinity, manifested at its absolute worst. And he said, as a result of reading that book, I've started releasing myself to try to do something better. I'm now seeing two therapists. I'm trying to get involved in building a better life. And I just want to thank you for saving not only my life, but also the lives of all the people I would have killed before I killed myself. And I sent that on to Jordan Peterson, and he and I and the president of the masculinity division of the American Psychological Association are all on board and trying to work with this fellow, Carlos, to build a more constructive life. And ultimately, we hope be able to reach the people he had been fascist allies with, and to try instead of, and help them be seen and heard. One of the most important things that came out of that for me was reinforcing my feeling that I work in couples communication workshops about, that I talk about that anger is often vulnerability's mask. And when we look for the vulnerability, as we did in Carlos, or Carlos felt was seen in him, it releases the anger, it diminishes the anger, reduces and minimizes the anger. And so the attitude toward oftentimes men who are angry is to fight them as opposed to hear them. And one of the things that Paul Elam is doing in Voices for Men is getting men like this together and having them listen to each other. And in the process of not just being argued with, but listened to, they begin to heal and come out better men than they were before, men that are prouder of themselves. And so that's, I'd say, one of the examples of my happiest moments that, I felt that writing the boy crisis really in a very concrete way was helpful. My biggest disappointment is seeing the women who had been my friends and colleagues, from Gloria Steinem to Betty Friedan to all the women leaders of the women's movement, go from so much focus on empowering women, which is something I am 100% supportive of, to such a focus on victimhood and men as the oppressors and men as the patriarchy. This has this easy way of just that one focuses on their victimhood and hones victim power as a fine art. We don't respect people who hone victim power. We respect people who say, okay, I was in a bad position there. Now, what can I learn from that? How can I move on? How can I also hear the perspective of the person that maybe I felt oppressed by? And then rise above that to really empower myself. And the fact that the feminist movement has put so much emphasis on victim power has deeply disappointed me.
Lysander Maybe asks, it seems to me that the roots of feminism is man disposability, and making more people know about man disposability is how you could, something you can understand how they think, why they like feminism so much. It's a fact that can hardly be denied, such as wars, or seen as against women. I feel communication about it should be one of the priorities. What do you think about that? Has it been tried this way?
Absolutely, I absolutely agree. The reason that the Myth of Male Power's subtitle is why men are the disposable sex, despite the publisher's resistance, I got that in as a subtitle, was because I wanted us to understand that, yes, every generation has had its war. And in every generation's war, we've had some equivalent of the government, in our case in the United States, Uncle Sam needs you. And men were willing to give up their lives because when they felt that they were needed. And that's why now we need to be saying, dads, we need you as dads. You are needed. And when your children have a dad involved as well as the mom involved, and when you're engaged in what I call checks and balance parenting, where the dad is listening to the mom and the mom is listening to the dads, and you're working out some win-win situation for the child, it's then that the children grow up with fewer mental health problems, with much less likely to be addicted to video games, much less likely to be addicted to porn, much less likely to commit suicide. And the 70 major problems that haunt young boys and young men are avoided when there's dad involvement as well as a mom involvement. And so there's a real need for people to understand that that men did not have this oppressor. They were not brought up to be oppressors. They were brought up to be willing to adapt the social bribes. Social bribes is a very important concept. By being called hero, by being told that they were the officer and the gentleman, not the private and the pacifist. That if they were that officer and a gentleman, they would be called a hero. If they risked their lives and died for their wife, their children, as a firefighter, they would be called hero. They would be honored. They'd have uniforms, and women would worship them, and the fathers and mothers would be proud of them. If they did that, if they risked disposability to protect and save others, they were given honors, and as a result of that, men learned to be disposable. and to prepare for disposability in things like football, in which the men are competing to get a piece of leather across a finish line in exchange for possible concussion, spinal cord injury, or what have you. But the cheerleaders go first and 10, do it again, not first and 10. Don't do that. That's ridiculous. That's preparing for disposability. But men constantly get many messages that Lois Lane, for example, had no interest whatsoever in Clark Kent, who expressed feelings, who was sensitive. But as soon as she found out that Clark Kent was Superman, she was very interested. And then she thought she was a big contributor to Superman by teaching him how to cry. But the man who knew how to cry, Clark Kent, she had no interest in. So women have historically been not just female women, not only female humans, but all animals from spiders and insects right on up through buck elks. The female is almost always attracted to the alpha man. She's not attracted to the man who's saying, I also have feelings, I have fears. And because, so the buck elk, for example, gets attracted to this alpha male buck elk who has the longest rack of any other of the buck elks. But in the process of getting that big rack, that buck elk sacrifices 30% of his minerals, 30% of his nutrition and calcium. And so the moment he procreates with the woman who's seeking this alpha male or him, he's ready to die if he doesn't get rid of that rack immediately before the winter season sets in and he has time to replenish his nutrients. And that's a perfect metaphor for men's weakness being their facade of strength. It's a perfect metaphor for male disposability, that the woman loved the male who was most willing to be disposable, appeared strong, but in fact was the weakest. But his strength served to keep away people she didn't want to procreate with her and be willing to die in the process.
I do have to say, Warren, I really love listening to you talk. I love hearing your points of view because you really hit it home on so many things. I love that Superman analogy right there. And it's so deep. Like you have to stop and really think about it. It's like, yeah. So that's always a pleasure to just hear new insights you come up with because it really is thought-provoking.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chris.
So our next question is from Steve Moxon, a fellow writer. Hi, Warren. How long do you give identity politics generally and or extreme feminism specifically until it implodes? What do you think will be the triggers?
Well, I think I wish I had a great answer to that question. I think that the Democrats will be hit hard in the United States in 2022. I think whether it gets them to realize that part of the way they're being hit hard is because they're so focused on cancel culture, on woke, on creating safe spaces, on microaggressions, on so many things that make them look like victims, and they're completely ignoring boys and men. And if you think about it politically, boys, if you're focusing on boys' issues and the challenges that boys are having, there are millions and millions of mother and father parents that care more about their sons than they do about their political identity. And if one party was to really focus on the importance of dads and raising successful boys, I think they would have millions of votes that they don't otherwise have. And so the political potential is there. I have tried to sell that to both the Democratic presidential candidates and the Republican presidential candidates. And the Republican, when I went to the White House to debrief the White House in the Trump administration about the Boy Crisis book, all 14 people that I met with were extremely excited. They wanted to bring that up and make it an issue, and they didn't do it. And so so how long it will take, I think we're talking about sometime in the next 10 years, there'll be a breakthrough. in this area, and that will lead to an understanding, to an openness to understanding boys and men's issues. On the disappointing side, the number of TV shows and so on that have interviewed me and then turned around, from Katie Couric to Lisa Ling, that have turned around, and then there's super producers or somebody where high in the network eliminated or dropped the things that I was saying for fear of bad reactions from their audience, or for fear that I was associated with the men's rights movement, which is really evil, and that type of thing. And so we have an enormous amount of resistance to even hearing the argument in the media. And so hopefully all of that will be broken down in the next 10 years.
Before I go into my next question, my wife handed me my copy of The Boy Crisis. I'm actually still in the middle of reading it, so as you can see. But yeah, that was good. So the next question comes from Kieran C. Dr. Farrell, with all the changes to society over the past 2 years, social distancing, singular focus on safety, mask wearing, job losses, studying, working from home, school closures, lockdowns, etc., in what ways do you think that boys in particular would be impacted by this? What advice would you have for parents whose sons are experiencing this as they grow up?
Yes, first, make sure that you understand that you get the biological father involved. When I was raising 2 children that were both stepchildren of mine with my wife from when they were 6 and 7. And when I wrote my first book on this issue, Father and Child Reunion, I sent a copy of it to the biological father of one of the daughters. The other one was adopted, and the biological father got more involved with his biological daughter, even though he had been 500 miles away from that. I wanted, when I did the research for Father and Child Reunion and the Boy Crisis, I wanted to believe that a good stepfather could be just as good as any biological father. But I think the best way to understand that is that when a child looks in the mirror and sees, especially if he sees it's a boy and he sees the father being criticized, he looks in the mirror and says, I hear from my mom that my dad is irresponsible, he's a liar, he's a narcissist. Well, I'm looking in the mirror. Maybe I'm a narcissist. I did lie to so-and-so. Maybe I'm a fundamental liar. And all the things that we say that put men down, as our boys are hearing the future is female, that men are, just advantage takers and oppressors. These things, they look in the mirror and they say, if the future is female, is my life worth living? What's the future for me? I was born at the wrong time. And that is really depressing, but it reinforces the depression that many boys are experiencing about not having their fathers involved. And so when I did the research for the Boy Crisis, one of my most important sort of inquiries was, well, what's so important about father involvement? The biological father part, I can understand. The child looks in the mirror and sees that half of itself is the biological dad, half of itself is the biological mother. But what's the big difference in the way parents, moms and dads raise children that lead to children doing so much better when they have both father and mother in their life? And I started to see that so many of the things like roughhousing, dads will do, and moms will intuitively feel like, oh my God, I feel like I have, one more child to monitor here. And, how do I get them to, realize that, yes, the kids are going to have fun, but sooner or later they're going to get hurt. And so this is not going to be a good idea. She doesn't want to be controlling. But she ends up being about 100% right, that the children get hurt sooner or later. One of the children gets hurt. And so she's astonished when the father still doesn't learn his lesson and says, okay, you hurt the other, your sister by taking your elbow and sticking it in her eyes and pushing it away from the roughhousing things that we were doing, her away from the roughhousing that we were doing. So if you do that again, there'll be no more roughhousing. And the kids sort of like, yes, Dad, no problem. We won't do it again. But then they go back to the excitement of the roughhousing, and they experience excitement under fire, and they forget completely about the dad's warning. But then most dads stop the roughhousing at that point. And the children go, oh, no, don't stop. Don't stop. We won't do that again. And Dad says, sorry, you had your warning. No more roughhousing until tomorrow night or the night after. And then that tomorrow night or the night after, when the father says you can't do that aggressiveness or that roughhousing that way again, the children know that the last time they violated that rule, they lost what they really wanted. They lost roughhousing. So there's almost no dads that explain to mom some version of this. What that process was doing was teaching Jimmy to think of his brother and his sister's feelings and what they needed, not just what he needed to win at the roughhousing. So that's the beginning, the data shows, of empathy. And so we find that fathers that do roughhousing with children, the children are more likely to be empathetic because when they lose the roughhousing as a result of transgressing the dad's command to think of your sister's or brother's feelings and not just your own, the child loses what it wants. The child is also learning postponed gratification. The child is learning to do what it wants to do is push the brother or sister aside to win at the roughhousing. But it knows now that if she or he does not push brother or sister aside, that they'll lose what they want immediately, but they'll get what they want in the long run. The roughhousing and the fun of being in a roller coaster ride with their dad. And that bond increasing with the dad. And so, but moms can't be blamed to not understand this because dads can't hear what moms don't say. And dads can't be blamed for not understanding this because when I did the research for the Boy Crisis book, I examined all the parenting magazines and other parenting books, and the parenting books didn't tell dads, even if dads read the parenting books, they didn't say anything to dads about the value of roughhousing creating empathy, the value of roughhousing creating a distinction between being assertive versus aggressive, the value of roughhousing creating postponed gratification, and postponed gratification being the single biggest predictor of success or failure, and the child feeling good about its ability to be able to compete effectively with peers, get the praise of peers, get the praise of parents, get the praise of teachers. These are all things that evolve from the type of parenting that fathers do. But we've had zero communication about the differences between dad-style parenting and mom-style parenting. And that's only one of about 10 differences that mothers and fathers have to understand in order to be able to communicate with each other with a listening ear and a loving voice.
One thing I'd like to add to that, because I definitely remember reading about that in your book, is I had a horrible stepfather, but we did still do the roughhousing, and I am very grateful for that. But with everything that you mentioned, you're absolutely correct, the empathy. But one thing that I feel that is also gained from the roughhousing is control, or understanding the limitations of how we interact with other people. If I don't understand that, then I can easily hurt someone not realizing that I could. But through the process of roughhousing, sometimes it's trial by error. I accidentally hit someone too hard. Well, now I know that's going to hurt. Yeah. So I think that's another avenue for roughhousing, that all the things you said, but we also learn how to control our strengths.
Absolutely. And you can imagine that, if your son or daughter understands how, what's aggressive, what's assertive, and the nuances of it are experienced again and again through night after night of roughhousing, when that child goes to play with other kids, will your child be more appreciated and liked and have a better social life if she or he understands that difference between being aggressive and assertive? It's a pretty, self-evident answer. And so these are the types of things but again, there's so many things that dads do that are counterintuitive to the outcomes. The children being teased feels like a dad being insensitive to a child about something that the child would otherwise potentially be criticized about. But there are things that happen when a child is teased as opposed to directly criticized. And we really need to know the value of that. And teasing, like all things, especially all things that dads do, almost all these things can be, they are virtues, but they move too far, can become a vice. And that's the value of a dad and mom working together. So the child says, for example, Mom, can I climb the tree in the backyard? And mom goes, well, maybe sweetie, in a few years you can, but you're a little bit small for that now. But come back to me next year and we'll talk about it, okay? Okay. And then it talks to dad, and dad says, well, that tree is a little bit dangerous, but can you be really careful if you're climbing it? Yes, dad, I can be careful. I'll be careful. Don't worry about that. Well, okay, but just be very careful. So then mom sees the child climbing the tree and says, what in the world? Why did you climb the tree? I just told you you couldn't. Well, I asked dad. He said, yeah, I could. And then dad and mom have a discussion about that. And a constructive, checks and balance discussion would go something like this. The dad would say, I understand that when a child climbs a tree, he increases his IQ or she increases her IQ because they're constantly making, the synapses are constantly firing for the child, as the child is asking the question, what's safe, what's not safe? I'd rather have the child learn that when we're there to protect him or her than not. Mother goes, but you're not there to protect him. So as they get into an argument, they have to realize that argument is not one parent bad, another parent good, but rather that argument is trying to figure out a win-win situation for the child that might result in something like this. Okay, the child can climb that tree, but not above this level. And the child can climb that tree if you're out there under the tree, so that in case our child falls, you'll be able to catch the child, or at least prevent the child from falling directly onto the ground. And by the way, give me your cell phone. And so there's a little bit of both sides, the coin, but what the child ends up happening is the maximum amount of safety and the maximum amount of taking of risk. And that's the way, that's an example of the way that the parents who are both involved provide and can hear each other rather than shout each other down or make the other person feel unwanted or unneeded. That's the outcomes that provide the best outcome for the children that do the best in life are the ones that have that type of parenting, other things being equal, of course.
All right, so we got about another 15 minutes, so we got a couple more questions to go through. The next one is from Philip Tanzer. Dear Warren, here in the UK, there are quite a few conservative MPs or politicians who are open to the men's issue and participate in International Men's Day debate in Parliament. The other parties are very reluctant to represent men or actively opposed. Is the increased separation and lack of communication between liberals and conservatives positive for us or not? A strong conservative government could implement policies that help men because liberals oppose it. What are your thoughts? I think Warren froze. So,
yeah.
Sorry, everyone. That's the nature of technology these days.
Mm-hmm. Even in the future, nothing works.
10 points for anyone who catches that reference. Don't tell them. So we'll wait for Warren to get back, but I will.
Oops.
Oh, did you leave? Well, it still shows you here.
I'm here.
Oh, for some reason it disappeared up top.
Okay.
Oh, because you're now on the bottom. Okay.
Yeah. Right.
So one of the things that was said into the chat by Douglas, I believe, that not being old enough. And I agree with you. I mean, I still had a stepfather, like I said, he was horrible, but everything was always about I wasn't old enough or mature enough. Especially like when I tried to get my first job, my stepfather talked me out of it. It's like, oh, I don't think you're ready for a job just yet. And it's like, I missed out on that opportunity. And I didn't even begin like really cooking like I do now until I was about 25, because my family was very much like, you know, you're not mature enough. Ah, here we go.
Oh, good.
Sorry, I was pretending to be you.
And that's, I think, a very good replacement. Let's see. Sorry about that. Somehow or other we lost our link, and I'll probably ask you to repeat the question again, just so I can get back on track.
All right, so I'll ask the last part of Philip's question. Is the increased separation and lack of communication between liberals and conservatives positive for the men's movement or not? A strong conservative government could implement policies that help men because liberals are opposed to them. What are your thoughts?
Well, is it important for conservatives and liberals and other parties in between to communicate with each other? I have three answers to that. Yes, yes, and yes. The ability to hear each other is more important even than understanding boys' and men's issues, and here's why. So one of the reasons there is a boy crisis is because there's a lack of father involvement. One of the reasons there's a lack of father involvement is because divorces often lead to a lack of father involvement. So how do we solve that? Do we adopt legislation, pass legislation that prevents divorces? I don't think we want to do that. But do we want to make marriages better and communication better? We need, and how do marriages get better and stay better? In the last 30 years, I've been conducting couples communication workshops. And one of the things that's really clear to me is that we're biologically programmed to not be able to hear criticism. We're biologically programmed to think that people that differ from us are people who are the enemy. Progressives in the United States call themselves progressive. Well, what a self-righteous term to use, suggesting that everyone who doesn't agree with them is regressive. Conservatives in the United States call themselves patriotic. What a self-righteous term to use, suggesting that anyone that doesn't agree with me is not patriotic. So what's the first step that we need to take is to hear other people's perspectives with an understanding of their best intent, that both the Republicans and Democrats want to support their nation. Both conservatives and liberals want to have real progress. They just have different definitions of what real progress is. So that the most important thing we can do is one of the things I hope I do well in the Boy Crisis book is set up a structure for family dinner nights to prevent family dinner nights from becoming family dinner nightmares. One of the best things we can do for our children is to teach kids around the table not only how to talk while their parents listen and don't interrupt, but also to have the kids allow the parents to talk without them interrupting or being sidetracked by electronics and so on. So building in the structure for teaching kids communication at home, how to hear people they disagree with, how to hear outrageous things without interrupting. This is the beginning of a family that is strong. And the parents creating the example of that by being able to hear personal criticism without becoming defensive. And that's the core work that I do in the couples communication workshop, because it's biologically unnatural to hear personal criticism without becoming defensive. Personal criticism was seen in the past historically as being coming from an enemy. So what we did is we got our defenses up to prevent ourselves from being hurt by the enemy, or we learned to kill the enemy before the enemy killed us. All of that was functional for survival. All of that is dysfunctional for intimacy. And so what we have to learn is to hear each other. And the best thing that political leaders can do is to demonstrate not specializing in things that put the other party down and put their own party up, but specializing in being able to say, I think the best intent of this Republican, this conservative, this liberal was this. Did I get that right? And when people hear that they are being heard the people are finding the gold in what they have to offer rather than the stones without any value. People oftentimes have they rise to the occasion of being able to be more likely to work together than see the other party as an enemy.
Mr. 0303 asks, thank you for all your work during the years, Dr. Farrell. Given that most politicians would either exploit male disposability or pander to women, do you think that a bottom-up solution would be a better approach to fixing the family unit, as in help women see the value of men rather than relying on the government, who are in direct competition with men when it comes to the protection and provision for women?
I think the question is the answer is all of the above. Every political movement that has made a lot of progress. I remember when I first got involved with the feminist movement, and some people would be saying, oh, this group is too socialist, this group is too conservative, this group is only focused on business, this group is only focused on the church. And the truth is that all of those foci were needed by people who understood the church, the business community, the conservatives and the liberals. And so we need to be talking to young girls and women about the fact that if when they are looking to get married and have children, if they're heterosexual and inclined in that way to have children, they're not going to be searching for boys that are in unemployment lines and living in their family's basement. The better that boys do, the larger the quantity of boys you will have to choose a good husband and a good father from. And so boys doing well, boys being in crisis is girls being in crisis. And so if you really want to help girls and yourself, work to help boys understand the challenges that they're going through. Work to help your peers understand that boys' IQs have gone down 15% in the last couple of decades, that their sperm count has dropped 60%, that boys without dads are the ones most likely to commit suicide, and the girls without dads are highly likely to commit suicide as well. The addiction to video games, video games have a lot of positives, but at the addiction level, they have a lot of negatives. Porn has a function, but porn at the level of being addicted to porn has so many dysfunctions, I can't begin to mention it. For the boy, for the girl that's involved with the guy that is addicted to porn, there are so many things that are happening to boys today that is in the political self-interest as well. When I met at the White House, they understood that it was politically in their self-interest. For reasons that are too complex to go into now, they didn't end up following through with that. But I think the political self-interest in focusing on boys and focusing on boys having fathers and girls having fathers can very much be framed in a way that is positive to both political parties. Example, women, mothers, single mothers. Between my marriages, I met the woman who became my wife 27 years ago, and I dated women who were single for a period of time after that. Most of them had children. The word that they used most frequently with me was overwhelmed. They felt I tend to be attracted to very powerful women, and those women were raising children. They felt constantly torn between their devotion to their children and their devotion to their work. They were just overwhelmed. Now, one of their interests in me, I think, was coming in and is relieving them of that burden of being involved. I love kids. And so women need involved fathers, not to be overwhelmed. We need to say to men, you are needed. You're not just needed to clean, do diapers and things like that, or to make money. You are needed because your child needs the boundary enforcement that dads tend to bring. They need the focus on discipline. They need the focus on risk taking. They need to bring, they have so many things that they bring to the children, but men don't even know what they bring to the family table. And so that's the education we need to do. We need to do it on every level, not just down up, not just up down, but the churches, faith-based communities, sports, coaches. I'm training and working with coaches now in Northern California to understand the difference between sports' old goal of beating enemies to sports' new goal of learning how to cooperate and work with each other.
So one thing that I've taken away from today that I think is very powerful is that too much of a good thing becomes a dysfunction. And certainly when we don't have fathers, we're always looking for more of that good thing. But again, as you say, video games has some positives. There's a place for porn in our lives, but too much of these things really cause a lot of negative effects. So we've got time for one more question, and this is from Douglas.
I had one quickie there, Chris.
Okay, sorry.
That every virtue taken to its extreme becomes a vice.
Yes, that is absolutely correct on that one. So we got time for one more question, and this is from Douglas, and I really love this question. Some of what you talk about fathers, Warren, relies upon the father having had a father. As a man who did not have a father in his life, I know I was not as good of a father as you talk about, for example. As you say, parenting books don't give that. Fatherless boys grow up not even understanding what a father is. So how do we change this for the next generation of children?
Yes, I hope that a contribution I made is focusing exactly on that issue in the Boy Crisis book, sort of saying, not just here's roughhousing, but here's the connection. Here's why roughhousing leads to a child being more likely to be empathetic, being more likely to be able to distinguish between being assertive and aggressive. And men have to know the data, the fact that they're not just, that what we intuitively do has a lot of positive value that data is now available to explain. But we have to explain that to the moms because the moms haven't read it in their parenting books and dads haven't explained it to moms. And we have to explain it in a loving way. Because more important than what you say is how you say it and how you listen to the response that may disagree with that, and how you're willing to make progress to get to finding win-win situations rather than defeating the other parent. And so these are the do not, if you are a father that hasn't had a father, take the Barack Obama approach. He basically didn't have a father. And he went and became a great father by if you understand nothing else, just putting in the time and understanding that dad's time is more important than dad's dime. Dad's time is what creates emotional security with the child. And there's girl children and boy children in different ways. Girl children that don't have a lot of physical contact with their father and a lot of emotional contact with their father, they end up getting pregnant in teenage years at way disproportionately, and without being married. And so they end up raising children by themselves when they are still a child. And so one of the reasons for that is that when girls haven't had a lot of like roughhousing, for example, with the dad, those children end up yearning for touch. But the girl starts getting involved with the boy, and she doesn't feel comfortable maybe being sexual that quickly, but she feels that's the only way she can keep that boy from going to another girl that will be sexual more quickly. So she's sexual more quickly because she doesn't know how to banter, how to play, how to interact in a way that allows physical touch not necessarily have to be sexual touch with a boy, as she did learn from her father. And so there's so many things. If you are asking the question you're asking, I especially encourage you to focus on chapter 16 on the differences between dad style parenting and mom style parenting, and to get an understanding of not just what your natural contributions are, but how the children benefit from that. And then always make sure you don't replace ignorance about that with an argument to your wife or the mother, because that'll never go anywhere as much as listening does.
Unfortunately, I'm going to have to stop here. I mean, I so far have enjoyed my time meeting you for the first time, and just I could talk to you for hours on end. So I thank you for coming out today. What are some best ways for people to find your work or your resources?
The easiest certainly is on Amazon, just doing the Boy Crisis Amazon, or doing my name, Warren Farrell, Amazon, and the books I've written, it will come up. I think the ones that men in this community will most appreciate is The Boy Crisis and The Myth of Male Power. Amazon does usually have a sale on it. They do have a sale on the Boy Crisis right now. But if you have enough money to support your local bookstore, certainly a bookstore is a wonderful thing to support. Also, I have to say that as many men, probably more men, are appreciating the Audible version of the Boy Crisis book. I read my 6th, 7th of the book, and John Gray, the fellow who wrote Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, read his portion of it that deals with ADHD issues. And so I probably, if you have a commute or you work out at a gym on a treadmill, probably the Audible version of it is the best.
All right. Well, I thank all the attendees here today. If you didn't get your question answered, please post them in the Q&A section of this Whova application. And I will invite Warren to go ahead and take a look at those and see if there's any that he can answer. We've got Hannah Wallen coming up, and then we have her live Q&A after that. So I look forward to seeing you all again in about an hour. Best wishes to you, Dr. Warren Farrell. Thank you for all the work you've done.
It was great to meet you.
Thank you for doing the reading, asking great questions, listening patiently. It's been a real pleasure with both your thoughtful questions and your very receptive listening.
Thank you. That means a lot to me.
Thank you.
Thank you.